Today on Songs of Praise, to mark the centenary of the Battle of Jutland, I'm on board HMS Caroline, the only remaining ship to have fought in this defining sea battle of World War I, for a sneak peek before she opens to the public for the first time. So do join me.
Yes, all aboard for Songs of Praise in 15 minutes, after Points of View now with Jeremy Vine.
Two takes on life in London's East End have had you talking this week, and you are ticked off at the tinkering with a format that is almost 40 years old. Welcome to the show where you get to have your say on the week's TV. It was time for BBC One and BBC Two to burst into bloom again this week. Beginning with an hour-long preview show last Sunday, between them the channels have devoted over 12 hours to coverage of this year's Chelsea Flower Show, with the presenting lineup including Monty Don, Joe Swift, Nicky Chapman and James Wong.
There is something here for absolutely everyone, including the unique view of the artist Grayson Perry.
Taste is something that I've been fascinated with all my life, and when some people say I like something, that's a huge, complex thought.
Your opinion on this year's broadcast was pretty cut and dried, feeling there was too much talk and not enough time just to gaze at the gardens.
All through the winter we wait, waiting for Chelsea Flower Show to come. What will we see? Beautiful plants, flowers, the colour, the spectacle, the wow. But do we see it? No. Monday and Tuesday were really disappointing. Lots of inconsequential chat.
I just turned the Chelsea Flower Show off. What with interviews with obscure celebrities and gardeners trawling all over the world? I was fed up waiting to see the actual gardens.
Surely the flowers and gardens should be the stars, not humans.
And it wasn't just the show's focus on patter rather than plants you were bemoaning. When it came to your thoughts on one of the presenters' attire, you did not beat around the bush.
Hello and welcome to Chelsea Flower Show. It's nice to be back, isn't it? It's just familiar surroundings.
Why is it that every other member of the BBC team is smartly dressed? And Monty looks like he's borrowed his clothes from a scarecrow.
On Monday he was wearing a jacket 2 sizes too large for him, and yesterday, Tuesday, he appeared to come straight from his garden. Can somebody please ask him to smarten up?
Grounds perhaps for Monty to turn over a new leaf when it comes to choosing his Chelsea clobber. You can see highlights of this year's Chelsea Flower Show on BBC One tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. or BBC Two if you are in Northern Ireland.
Northern skies.
4 years after he last graced our screens in the role, Sunday night saw Kenneth Branagh return for a final outing as the Swedish detective Wallander in the first of 3 stories adapted from Henning Mankell's novels.
I think we should get you moving.
In The White Lioness, Kenneth's character Kurt left scenic Sweden behind for an equally spectacular South African setting. Visiting Cape Town for a conference, the detective was quickly caught up in the case of a missing Swedish woman.
Sergeant Mtembu and her colleagues are doing everything they can. I know it's frustrating, but if you talk to the press and not the police, it's getting in the way of the investigation.
While some were fans of the story and star,
Good plot. Understated Branagh made for ideal viewing.
both fell pretty far short of the mark for others.
Overlong, tedious, unconvincing and confusing. Branagh is so wooden he's a fire hazard. Screenplay would shame the average sixth former.
So slow-moving and ponderous. Come on, BBC. You're usually more punchy.
And for at least one of you, Sunday's adaptation did the original novel a real disservice.
If you want to produce low-grade drama, I suggest you refrain from marketing it as an adaptation of an excellent work. Your effort was an insult. Mr. Branagh's acting was a pretty poor effort. Perhaps he wasn't fully convinced by the production either.
Mum was the word on Friday night as BBC Two's news sitcom reached the halfway point in its 6-episode run. Brought to us by the writer and creative team behind BBC Three's BAFTA-winning comedy Him and Her, Mum stars Olivier Award winner Leslie Manville as Kathy, a woman trying to rebuild her life in the year following her husband's death.
Big sis! Haven't you grown?
I always say that, don't I?
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, you remember Pauline?
Yeah, nice to see you again. Thanks for coming. No, not at all. I love a funeral. Good.
Though depicting a scenario perhaps not normally associated with humour, there was plenty of praise for this one.
A cleverly written observational drama where the characters' unspoken words and facial expressions speak volumes. I thought it was well acted and liked it.
Well written, well acted, well directed. It's not often a good sitcom comes along, but I thought this was one.
A future classic perhaps, but views were varied on whether the show's portrayal of life after losing a loved one was authentic.
Absolutely brilliant. An accurate description of grief. BBC comedy at its best.
It's almost 5 years since I lost my wife, and this programme bears no resemblance to what actually happens. I'm afraid I won't be watching any more episodes.
You can make your mind up on Mum by catching the series on the iPlayer. While the passing of Peggy Mitchell in EastEnders proved a talking point for you last week, once more activity in Albert Square has had you getting in touch. As Martin and Stacey celebrated their wedding in the Queen Vic last Friday, life in the Beale household took a sinister turn when Jane arrived home to collect the couple's wedding cake and discovered her adoptive son Bobby packing his bags.
You will not go out that door. Do you understand me? You can't tell me what to do. I ain't even my real mum. Well, in that case, I will ring your father, and he can sort you out.
Next, viewers saw Bobby approach Jane from behind, hitting her on the head with a hockey stick. After she slumped onto the table, 2 more thuds were heard, and blood was seen splattering across Stacey's and Martin's cake before viewers then heard Jane fall to the floor. Broadcast just before 8:30 p.m, some of you felt the scene fell on the wrong side of the watershed.
I cannot believe the BBC would allow an episode of EastEnders showing at 8 p.m. to display such blunt violence.
After the terrifically handled death of Peggy Mitchell, I was very disappointed at the harrowing scene showing Bobby attacking Jane. I felt the extra blows to the head and blood splatters were wholly inexcusable before the watershed.
Do the EastEnders producers really think in days of ever-increasing random acts of violence this is a sort of responsible fodder they should be churning out?
Here is what the BBC had to say in response to those comments.
EastEnders is a fictional drama, and our millions of regular fans know and expect dramatic storylines. However, we are always mindful of our time slot and ensure all scenes are editorially justified. Viewers have seen Bobby arrested, and he and his family will be facing up to his behaviour in the most serious of ways.
Now, real-life tales from London's East End came under the microscope on BBC One on Tuesday night. The Last Whites of the East End recorded the thoughts and experiences of members of Newham's white working-class community as they chose to remain in or leave an area which had seen their numbers dwindle by half in the last 15 years.
It's not like the old East End. Everyone knew everyone. Leave your doors open. You knew who you was hanging around with. You don't know.
And it's not your children, it's other people now.
It is other people as well. And it's just scary, I think.
The hour-long documentary was well received by some.
Brilliantly put together programme, and I would imagine was a true representation of the East End of London as it is now. All sides of society showed their lifestyles well.
Great documentary that showed how the area has changed in a very short period.
But this one definitely divided opinion. Some of you felt exploring the effects of immigration through the eyes of just one section of the community led to a programme which was unbalanced and bordering on racist.
Disappointed with the BBC for The Last Whites of the East End, which is as one-sided and racial hate-stirring as it sounds.
A very one-sided show. If anything, it just showed that people didn't want to go to working men's clubs or tea dances. You can't blame immigration for that.
Absolute jingoistic nonsense. The thing driving people out of the East End isn't immigration. It's sky-high rents.
Well, after criticism of the show on social media was picked up by the press, the BBC defended the programme, saying the following.
The documentary set out to explore the impact of rapid change on long-standing communities in the East End, and to discover why some people are leaving the area. The film featured a wide range of people voicing personal opinions and showed many facets of life in Newham, exploring both positive and negative views across a variety of issues.
Next up for appraisal, an item dating back to 1979, which normally receives a high valuation. The 38th series of Antiques Roadshow recently drew to a close on BBC One, with Fiona Bruce and the show's assortment of experts having examined prized possessions ranging from clocks and cameras to collectibles from China.
Her mending a dragon robe is supposed to represent correcting a mistake or an error of the emperor.
Previously, viewers were able to stay with an item, hearing its history before its value. This year, however, in some instances, the programme has chosen to mix it up, quickly switching between two collectibles before their values are revealed.
You can imagine how splendid the gardens were then, as they look again now.
Then the Duke and Duchess of Sutherland decided to try something else with this property. They created the Art Deco swimming pool, and you went to that pool.
Yeah, we all went in.
You all swam in it.
Yes.
They do say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I was saddened to see that the details about some of the items have now been split into assorted segments. This really breaks the continuity about the items. I'd just like to know who thinks this is a better way.
Interweaving the beginning, middle and ends of two narratives of two objects just means that I now have no idea as to what either of the two objects were, their age or their value. It was completely impossible to follow.
Not enjoyable to watch at all. What is wrong with just following an item through?
In fact, the format tinkering has meant you have been reaching for your remotes.
Sound bites of that sort of thing, just not needed. I don't think it works. It was that annoying I had to switch it off. Please, 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 go back to the original.
It's a mishmash. Do you like it?
You're clear you don't like it. We fed your feelings back to the show's executive producer Simon Shaw, and here's his response.
Recently, we have introduced some shorter sequences to better illustrate the lively atmosphere of the day. These comprise a tiny percentage of the show, which will always focus on clarity in the explanation and illustration of the items featured.
Finally this week, we were very intrigued to receive the following email concerning BBC One's new daytime series, Council House Crackdown.
Let Andy know there's a rat in his office, running, back left shelf.
Driven by the prospect of a scoop on a council office rodent infestation, our crack team of researchers immediately sprang into action, and they had soon tracked down the scene Graham had spotted. Take a look for yourself.
And that enabled me to be able to apply for his bank statements.
Let's take another look. On closer examination of the evidence, though, our delight soon turned to bitter disappointment when we saw this a few seconds later. Not a rat at all, but actually the top of a head belonging to a human. Scene opening a cupboard here. Oh, rats. That's all for this week, but whether you have got a view on last night's Musketeers or tonight's Top Gear, please do keep your comments on the week's TV coming. You can record and send a video message through our website at bbc.co.uk/POV or quickly fire us an email. Our address, I'm sure you know it, is pov@bbc.co.uk. On social media, do tweet us at bbcpov or join in the conversation about the BBC's television programmes on our brilliant Facebook page. Just search for BBC Points of View. We're back at the same time next week, 5 p.m, right here, BBC One. See you then.